Good morning, everyone. It's so good to be with you this morning, and we are at our home studio instead of where we're normally, whatever. And I can't tell you, I don't think we can really express just how exciting this is to be back in your living rooms and your homes and being able to connect in this way. It was a great time being away, but this is where we wanted to be a lot of the time, and so we're thankful to be here. Um,
I'm just getting teary. I really miss all of you, and it's hard to come back from being away for a time and then to not get to see you in person. So I hope that you'll continue joining us for our sessions online, and we'll pray that hopefully one day we'll be able to get back together.
yeah. Hey, just want to share with you something that is coming up that's not really connected to our ministry necessarily that we're doing, but it's an event that's coming up that Michelle and I are going to participate with, and we want to tell you about it as well. Why don't you tell them about it?
So it's not a secret that for years I have been listening to the podcast Java with Julie, which sounds a little bit lame, but it's not lame. It is a podcast that's dedicated to reclaiming God's design for intimacy, and it's a subsidiary of Authentic Intimacy. So anyways, they are having like an online marriage conference because their normal conference, Reclaim, obviously can't meet in person. It's free, which is amazing. And then once you have to apply for a ticket, and then you have access to the streaming, so you don't have to watch it all in one sitting. So
you don't have to watch it live.
You don't have to watch it live. It's
right.
not. Yeah. So what we're planning on doing is after we put our kids to bed in the evenings, we're just going to try to watch a little bit at a time.
Yeah.
So I just want to encourage you, whether you're married or not married, whether you've got your sexuality down or whether you're on a really different journey, that it's a great opportunity for you. The topics are really broad. I will just tell you a few of them, from roommates to soulmates, what is holy sexuality, addressing underlying wounds, sex and aging, how the gospel sets us free, women in pornography, understanding sexuality and Generation Z, what does the Bible say about LGBTQ, understanding the intersection of female sexuality and race, the road to healing from sexual abuse, understanding female sexuality, and it kind of just goes on and on. So there's a lot of topics, and I want to encourage you that if you don't think that this applies to you, that maybe one day that God would use this to speak into someone else's life.
That's right.
So it's a great opportunity. It's free, and you can watch it from your couch.
So you can see more about that, and I will make sure to give you the links for this, but it's AuthenticIntimacy.com. And you're going to want to click on Reclaim 2.0. And again, it's a free conference event. It's happening online, and we can't recommend it highly enough.
Yeah.
So
okay, commercial over.
All right.
I'm going to get out of the shot.
Thank you, Michelle. All right. Well, we are going to go back into something that we started a lot of months ago, and that is going through the book or going through the teaching, the Sermon on the Mount. And it's okay. I just want to say this at the outset. It is okay if that comes as a surprise to you and you're sitting there thinking, oh, is that what we were studying? That's totally cool. No big deal. I had to look at my own notes just to see where we were. So no big deal. But if you have your Bibles, open them up to Matthew chapter 6. We are going to continue in the Sermon on the Mount, the teaching where Jesus gives us his most specific teaching about what it looks like to be a disciple in the kingdom of heaven, how the life of a disciple is completely polar opposite to anything else, any other way of life, any other philosophy that exists on earth. So anyway, we're going to be looking at Matthew chapter 6. If you want to go back, and it's okay if you don't, but if you want to go back and look at some other teachings that we've done, they're all on this YouTube channel, Resilient Disciples, and so you can go ahead and do that if you'd like. Let's go ahead and read this passage together, and we'll dive right in. Matthew chapter 6, beginning in verse 16. And when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, that their fasting may be seen by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. If you want to get better at something, you have to practice, right? If you want to become a proficient piano player, you can't just expect to sit down on the piano and kind of finger the keys a little bit, and then a few months later, you are a virtuoso. Is that even the right term? I don't even know. See, I need to learn more. See the piano right here? I'm actually taking piano lessons right now, and I'm very much a beginner. But if you want to become a better athlete, if you want to learn a foreign language, if you want to achieve any kind of goal, there has to be practice. You have to go after it over and over and over again. There has to be the discipline. You have to be willing to give something else up in order to spend the time to practice, to go over it over and over and over again to reach that goal. The same thing is true in the Christian life. The same thing is true in our discipleship to Jesus, especially when it comes to some of the spiritual practices that we've talked about a lot over the last 9 months. So things like prayer and reading the Bible and having a quiet time or silence and solitude, all of these different practices. If you want to become good at it, which that's not the right way to put it, but if you want to be able to do it in a way so that you get out of it all that you desire, you have to be willing to practice it over and over and over again. That's why for many of us, it becomes in our culture today where we expect things so quickly. We become discouraged when the reality of having to go back to prayer over and over and over again before you begin to experience the kind of intimacy and closeness to God that you're desiring. When you begin to realize that you have to be at the practice of prayer all the time, and in order to get there, that can become very discouraging based on our cultural context today. The same could be true with the practice of fasting. Fasting is no different. It's a spiritual practice that Jesus not only is talking about here, but as we'll see in a moment, Jesus kind of expects that his disciples are doing on a regular basis. Fasting is simply this, and if you have your famous half sheet, you can fill this in if you want. But fasting is this, very simply, it's the spiritual practice of denying oneself food in order to focus on one's total dependence on God. Now, we've had teaching on fasting in the past. I preached a sermon on it in our church many months back, and so I don't really see a reason why we need to go into too much depth on it. But I will say a few things. Number one, fasting is about it's about denying yourself food. Now, we've talked about this before. I really don't think that the spiritual practice of fasting has to do with, saying that I'm not going to be on social media for a month, or I'm not going to watch TV for a week or something like that. Those are good practices of abstention, but it's not fasting. Every time fasting is talked about in the scriptures, and even outside of the scriptures, it's always referring to denying yourself food. Now, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is talking about many spiritual practices. Before this, he was talking about prayer. Next week, we're going to be looking at giving to the needy. But here's just some very quick takeaways about fasting. Number one, Jesus has an expectation that his followers are fasting. Isn't that interesting? Fasting is probably one of those spiritual practices that many of us, myself included, don't have in our regular repertoire. It's just not something that we're doing on a regular basis. Maybe you do, and that's incredible. That's wonderful, and I would encourage you to do that. And if you're more like me, someone who doesn't always think about fasting, that might be something that you begin to build into. But the point here is Jesus says twice, when you fast, not if, when. That's an important takeaway from this. Jesus is expecting that his followers are fasting on a regular basis. Number two, there's a wrong way to fast and a right way to fast. Jesus looks at the Pharisees and said, don't be like them with their gloomy faces and walking around and, oh, I'm so hungry. That there's a wrong way to do it and a right way to do it. The right way is that you're not putting on a show. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. But there is a wrong way and a right way. The third takeaway from fasting from this passage is that there is a spiritual benefit to the person who fasts. Jesus says this, but when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face. Don't make a big show out of it. Don't make a big deal, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Now, this is not rewards of treasure and gold and perfect health or anything like that. And fasting should not be used as a diet plan or anything like that. But the reward that Jesus is talking about here is the reward of a close intimacy with God. Because when you're fasting, you are doubling down on the reality that your dependence is completely on God. I mean, for those of us who have spent time fasting, maybe for a day or 2 days or whatnot, even in that first couple of hours, you begin to feel hungry. You feel it in your stomach, and then even in your body, and you start to get the shakes, and you feel the physical effects of fasting, and that's supposed to happen. And it's supposed to point your eyes, your spiritual eyes, to the Lord, that my complete dependence for everything, not just food, but even my very being, is dependent on God. And that is a good reminder, especially in a day where we have Amazon Prime 2-day delivery, right? Where I can get anything I want anytime. I mean, it's Labor Day, so there's sales going on everywhere. I don't know about you, but I'm getting hit up on the internet, social media, like, hey, it's Labor Day. Why don't you come drop some money you don't have, right? Just everywhere. We'll even give you free shipping. I mean, it is pervasive. It is attacking me. And so I can begin to think, well, hey, all I got to do is do a little click. All I got to do is do a little on the phone, and I can get anything I want. But the disciple of Jesus remembers and is constantly thinking about, I don't mean like every second, but is consistently reminded of the fact that every time I eat a meal, every time I put on my clothes, every time I walk out of my home, that I am dependent on God for all of these things. And fasting is just a great reminder and foundational practice to keep that at the forefront. And it's hard. Why is it hard? Well, Western culture, where we live, values excess. We value excess. We want more and more and more. Secondly, fasting is hard because denying self is not part of our cultural programming. Like, that is not part of the teaching of radical individualism. Radical individualism is heap on everything for yourself. It's all about you. It's not about anybody else. And if anybody steps on that, then they're trying to keep you down and oppress you. Western culture has nothing to do with denying self. Thirdly, fasting is difficult because it's a spiritual practice that requires time. It's a spiritual practice that takes time and repeated effort before the wave of reward begins to roll in. Just like if you haven't been in the Word, or if you haven't been in prayer for a long time, and then you sit down to open up the Word and spend time in prayer, the first time after a long season, it's probably not going to be like this great Isaiah 6 or Revelation 20 moment, right, where the heavens open up. It's probably not going to be like that. It might be. God does what he wants to do, but it probably won't be. It'll probably be some grind in it. And I know that sounds bad, but there is that necessity to go back to it over and over and over again. Fasting is the same way. And it is especially harder if it's not a regular practice. I had a season in my life where I had a practice of fasting once a day. Once a week. Once a week for an entire day, I would spend the day fasting. And it was not easy, and it was hard. And there were even some weeks where I either forgot and started eating some peanuts or something, or I don't know, maybe in sin just decided I'm not doing this today. It was a difficult thing to do. But as the weeks went by, I began to it didn't get easier, but I began to see the spiritual rewards that Jesus is talking about, the intimacy with God and the reminder of my need for God. So we're going to talk about just having a practice of fasting in just a little bit, but I want to point you towards another takeaway in this text that Jesus is also addressing here. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I do want to just point it out. Fasting is not the only thing that Jesus is addressing here. It's the main thing, but not the only thing. The other point that Jesus is alluding to is how pervasive is the desire to be liked and have the approval of others. Listen to what Jesus says here. He says, "Do not be like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces that their fasting may be" what? "Seen by others." How desperately there's something about the human heart that makes us want to have the approval of others, to be liked by others. And I'm not saying that's always a sinful thing, but it can lead into a very sinful, idolatrous practice of always needing the approval and always wanting to be liked by other people. I mean, think about it. How often do you make decisions in your life that are predicated on what other people will think if you have this or do this or go somewhere? Everything from the car we drive, the clothes we wear. I mean, honestly, I'll be transparent. I put on this shirt this morning, and you know what went through my head, just like for a brief second, what went through my head was, oh man, that's a really cool pocket tee. It's a little boutique surf shop in Santa Cruz. They'll think I'm really indie surf cool, right? Like, how ridiculous is that? In a flash, that went through my head as I grabbed this shirt out of my drawer, right? Like, it just happens. We think, what will people think of me if I do this, if I say this, if I post this, or if I make this comment, or if I plant my flag on this movement? What will people think of me? And oftentimes we are driven by what people will think of us, not by what we are called or commanded to do or be. It reaches into the heart, I think, so easily, so much so that sometimes we don't even know it's there. The desire to please others, gain their approval, be liked by others, it's just part of, and listen, that is like part and parcel of social media, right? Anything that is posted, anything that's put up there. I mean, how often, do we put something online that we hope, what do we want? We want other people to see it, right? Like, remember when Twitter came out in 2007 and the whole premise was, why? I remember even saying this. Why does it matter if I write up on Twitter? Because this is all it was in 2007. Like, hey, I'm going to the store today to buy some new Nikes, right? And like, that's all it was. And we all kind of, at the beginning, we thought that's kind of ridiculous. But then we all kind of got on board. And then with social media, it became, this is what I'm doing. This is my family. This is what I believe in. This is what I'm passionate about. And sometimes it's really good. And it's not wrong or sinful to post a picture of your family on vacation in the Netherlands or wherever. It's not wrong to stand up and use a platform like social media to speak against the oppression of others. However, there is this pervasiveness in our culture where we want to be approved by people. And fasting is one way to keep ourselves away from this pool. Fasting reminds us of and reinforces these things. Number one, that it reinforces the difference between needs and wants. Fasting reinforces and reminds us of the difference between needs and wants. When we're in a practice of fasting, at the forefront of our minds and our hearts is what I truly need right now. We're not thinking about all of the other things. We're not thinking about the extras in life. We're not thinking about the things that take us away from the Lord. We're thinking about the things that I need right now. And fasting helps to give us focus in that. Second, fasting reminds us that Jesus is enough. Jesus is enough. I don't need the approval of others. I don't need to be liked. I like being liked by others, don't get me wrong, but I don't need that. I don't need to be liked in order to be a healthy, functioning adult human being. Jesus is enough. And finally, fasting reminds us that God's opinion of me is greater and matters more than any other. And I think this is important for us, especially as we're in a season where we are, just by nature of the time, we're glued to screens more often. We're seeing movements, and we're seeing social unrest, and we're seeing all kinds of messages go in front of us all the time. It is a good thing to be reminded that God's opinion of you matters more than anybody else's. And if that is where we start from, fasting helps to remind us of that. If we start from that position that God's opinion of us matters more, then we can enter into a more healthy place. So what can we be doing in practice this week? Well, I think it'd be great for us to practice practice fasting. And so here's what I'd like you to do. I'd love for you to pick a time frame. So is it going to be, is it going to be a meal? Is it going to be a day? Is it going to be, what time frame of fasting would you like to do? For Michelle and I, often our practice is we'll go sundown to sundown. And so we'll start our fast sometime in the evening. So we won't eat dinner, and then we won't eat breakfast, and then we won't eat lunch, and then we'll end the fast with dinner the next day. That's sometimes our practice. So you pick a time frame, and then pick a day. Right? When are you going to do it? And you have to kind of be methodical about this. It's a good thing to just kind of get it on the calendar, put it on iCal, put it on Google Calendar, so that it's a reminder coming up. And then if you live with other people, or you're going to be around a lot of other people, you should let them know that this is what you're doing. Now, Jesus' command here is not that you make your fasting a secret, but it's that you don't go around broadcasting it so that people will heap praise upon you. If you're with your family, just let them, and you're not doing it with your spouse or the rest of your family, just let them know, hey, mommy or daddy or whatever, I'm going to be fasting for the next 24 hours. So that's why I'll sit at the table with you. I'll enjoy conversation, but that's why mommy's not going to have anything on her plate. Right. Just let them know so that it's not this big deal. Okay. And here's what I'd like you to focus on after you have that all figured out. Think about these things as you're fasting. Where do I exert energy to gain the approval of others? Like, where do I burn calories seeking to gain approval from others? Number 2, do I consider Jesus to be enough, or do I try to find ultimate satisfaction in something else? Just process that through your brain. Let that be something that you write down on a piece of paper, and I believe this is on your half sheet, but just write down and think about. And then finally, consider this, that God does have the highest opinion of you. And you know why? Because you bear his image. God created you. God formed you. You bear the image of our great creator, God. Consider those things. And then next week, for not today, but next week in our teaching in Zoom, it'd be great to just hear how things went and you share how your practice of fasting went. Love you guys. We are going to transition into our Zoom discussion group. And so can't wait to see you there. The link should be downstairs below. The password is together. So simple. And we're going to try to keep this to be our Zoom link from now on. So anyway, love you all. Can't wait to see you in our Zoom discussion. Take care.